It's been 20 long years since the city of El Paso, Texas had a televised wrestling event. El Paso has long been the city I've called home, and as a lifelong wrestling fan, it's pained me that my city has been neglected for so long. El Paso is a wrestling city. We live and breathe professional wrestling. The city of El Paso is universally recognized in the wrestling world as the hometown of Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero is without a doubt one of the greatest professional wrestlers to ever live, which is why a city such as ours, a city that rarely sees anyone from their hometown reach the pinnacle in what they do, latched onto Eddie and treated him like a god whenever he came back home. We saw it when he came home when he was US champion in 2003, which was actually the last televised event my hometown ever had. Thankfully, when Eddie reached the top of the mountain the next year and became WWE champion, El Paso got to welcome him home at the El Paso County Coliseum, although that was just a house show. And after that, we became a neglected wrestling city who were deemed only good enough for house shows. Or at least that was the case when WWE were the only game in town. Hell, even WCW threw us a bone during their peak for a televised event. So when AEW formed, I begged and begged endlessly for them to make a stop in El Paso for Dynamite. A new wrestling promotion had a chance to come into my hometown and make this their territory. All we needed was a chance to prove ourselves as a passionate wrestling city. And so AEW finally came to town this past Wednesday and gave little old El Paso a chance. And already I've heard many calling us one of the best AEW crowds ever. El Paso is a border city. Therefore, we have the second largest Hispanic population in the entire country, which also means we have a rich love for Lucha Libre. I think other cultures tend to underestimate just how popular Lucha Libre is in Mexican culture. Going to a Lucha Libre show in Mexico is comparable to going to the movies. It's practically a part of everyday life. While wrestling is seen as a niche thing in America that is usually laughed at for being fake, Lucha Libre is embraced and engraved in the identity of Mexican culture. This is why during the World Cup you'll see Mexican fans wearing lucha masks, because it's part of all of us. To put in perspective, El Santo in Mexico was and still is far more popular than Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, The Rock, or John Cena ever have been in America. El Santo is regarded as the greatest luchador who ever lived. El Santo popularized Lucha Libre, starred in countless movies, and had multiple statues of him made across Mexico. If you asked anyone in America to name the greatest luchador to ever live, they'd probably say Rey Mysterio Jr. If you ask anyone in Mexico, they'd most likely say El Santo. Hell, I could see most Mexicans naming 7 other luchadores besides El Santo before even getting to Rey Mysterio Jr. El Paso is essentially an extended part of Mexico disguised as a US city, and I say that with all the love in the world. I love this city and I love this culture, my culture. That's why I said El Paso lives and breathes professional wrestling. The majority of people here are of Mexican descent, and Mexicans love beer, football, boxing, and wrestling, not specifically in that order. What I love about AEW coming to town is that they knew where they were coming to. They embraced the Latino culture and acknowledged how deprived we were of professional wrestling. Tony Khan gave his pre-show speech as he does before every Dynamite, and he mentioned El Paso not having a TV wrestling event in 20 years. He knew this and gave us a show that we'll remember for a lifetime. MJF rarely wrestles, so the fact that we got his first televised match since Winter is Coming meant that Tony Khan took El Paso seriously. And he didn't just wrestle anyone, he wrestled rising star Konosuke Takeshita after a great build in what ended up being a fantastic match as expected. We were hot as a crowd from the get-go, and I was proud to see just how educated of an AEW audience El Paso really was. This was a professional wrestling crowd, an AEW crowd. A near sellout crowd of over 4,000 was packed into the County Coliseum to prove why we belong on the list of the very best pro wrestling crowds. And again, thanks to AEW for giving us a card worthy of going crazy and not just giving us scraps. We got a hard-hitting match with AEW Women's Champion Jamie Hayter and the Bunny next. Hayter is the right choice to lead the charge in this current AEW civil war that the women are currently in. El Paso loved Hayter, a testament of everyone there actually being a fan of the show they were attending. Next, we got the Ricky Starks Gauntlet, and once again, Ricky Starks was the star of the show. Ricky ultimately came up short, but as long as he comes out on top in the end, he should be fine. Which reminds me, a huge thank you to Sammy Guevara for providing me with tickets for the show. The real highlight of the show though was Bryan Danielson versus Rush. Rush getting booed as a Mexican in El Paso takes some talent. but he made it happen, and he deserves all the praise in the world for making the most of his TV time. This was one of the best matches in Dynamite history, and I'm not sorry for patting my city on the back because we elevated this match into the stratosphere. Chants of "Sí, no, this is awesome," and "Culero" were deafening inside the arena. Rush and Bryan Danielson killed it, and I feel like this match, this moment, ensured AEW will return to El Paso. We still had a phenomenal trios titles match between the Elite and Top Flight with AR Fox. The Elite walked into the El Paso County Coliseum and the arena came unglued. The match was exactly what you expected, a fast-paced display of athleticism that came down to the wire. My only wish was that the House of Black could have come out after the match to set up a fight with the Elite at Revolution. The main event saw the Guns defeat the Acclaimed for the tag team titles, which I wasn't a fan of. Was anyone really? The highlight of this match was the Niños Culos chant, which means ass boys in Spanish. Also, Max Caster dropping some Spanish in his pre-match rap was hilarious too. The crowd was so disappointed when the Guns won, but the Acclaimed gave an off-the-air promo that lifted our spirits back up before Rampage. I made this video not to run down the card, but to make a statement for my city, which went decades being told they weren't good enough for a televised event. A city so rich and enamored with wrestling just gave a massive middle finger to those who only want to run house shows here. Everyone always raves about British crowds, but how about Latino crowds? Like Rush, we made the most of the opportunity given to us. A huge thank you to Eddie Guerrero for putting us on the map in the eyes of the American wrestling world, but it feels like a lot of people thought we were just that. Eddie Guerrero is the landmark of wrestling history for this city, but he's not the only part, and that's what the industry leaders seemed to forget. One thing a lot of people also forget is just how far El Paso is from every other major city in Texas. We aren't just a drive away like many would think. We are quite literally on an island of our own when it comes to Texas, which is why we don't just drive to other shows in Texas, because frankly, it's way too far. Thankfully, with AEW finally giving us a chance to prove ourselves on the national level, El Paso will continue to build a legacy as a passionate wrestling city for years to come. And no longer will we be denied or neglected of the sport we love so much. Somos pocos, pero somos locos. El Paso, Texas is all elite.